Hello, everyone. If you have any accessibility needs that haven't been met yet by our crowdsourced access there, you can send them to the panelists in the chat and we will work to meet them. So to open this talk, I'm sitting here in grad student housing at Michigan State University. And we want to acknowledge that MSU occupies the ancestral, traditional, and contemporary lands of the Anishinaabe Three Fires Confederacy of Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi peoples. In particular, the university resides on land ceded in the 1819 Treaty of Saginaw. We recognize, support, and advocate for the sovereignty of Michigan's 12 federally recognized Indian nations, for historic Indigenous communities in Michigan, for Indigenous individuals and communities who live here now, and for those who were forcibly removed from their homelands. By offering this land acknowledgement, we affirm Indigenous sovereignty, and we will continue working to hold MSU more accountable to the needs of American Indian and Indigenous people.
Some of the names of participants here today are new, and some are familiar from yesterday's events. Our names are not new, but Jessica and Michael Stokes. We are graduate students in Michigan State University's English program and the co-founders of the HIVES Research Workshop. For those of you attending a HIVES event for the first time, welcome. Over the last year and a half, HIVES has been actively working to generate community at Michigan State University through workshops, creative collaboration, and events like this. In the not too distant future, our first artifact of these collaborations will be published, the Buzz Zine. Please keep an eye out on our website, BHIVES, with one E, like the mishearing of the Austin Powers, BHIVE, so BEHIVE.org. We will also be hosting one more reading in Keynote this year. Canadian poet Jordan Scott will be sharing some of his work from the books Night and Ox and Lanterns at Guantanamo on December 4th.
What a pleasure to learn with Eli Clare during yesterday's HIVES Writing Center and Feminisms, Genders, and Sexuality workshops. Claire wheeled and walked us through a writing workshop on body-mind difference, where we explored brilliant imperfection. Brilliant imperfection is a concept Claire is loath to define, but happy to generate shining and limping examples of with us all. Participants used playful, community-crafted, associative practices and ample space and time to write in order to develop poetry and writing that surprised each other. In the afternoon, Claire taught workshop participants about compounding, contradicting, and tangled systems of oppression that ensnare queer, trans, and disabled people, particularly Black, Indigenous people, and people of color.
Claire's work has been central to HIVES conversations from the outset. Claire reminds us again and again of the hives of relationships we exist within. Claire writes, white Western culture goes to extraordinary lengths to deny the vital relationships between water and stone, plant and animal, human and non-human, as well as the utter alliance of human upon human. We must not deny, but attend to our interdependent relationships and those upon whom we rely. HIVE relies on a series of networks of support. The event couldn't be possible without the extensive collaboration of the Feminisms, Genders, and Sexualities Workshop, Michigan State University's Writing Center, the Council of Graduate Students who have underwritten CART for all of this fall's events, Dean Bill Hart Davidson, the College of Arts and Letters, and the Engaged Pedagogy Grant.
So thank you all for joining us for Claire's keynote presentation, Notes on Cure, Disability, and Natural Worlds. I've seen a lot of messages already to us panelists about how lovely Eli Clare's work is, how it matters to us, and how excited folks are. And so just to make sure we know everything about Claire, we need to know going in, I'm just going to read his bio. So white, disabled, and genderqueer, Eli Clare lives near Lake Champlain in occupied Abenaki territory, currently known as Vermont. where he writes and proudly claims a penchant for rabble-rousing. He has written 2 books of creative nonfiction, Brilliant Imperfection, Grappling with Cure, and Exile and Pride, Disability, Queerness, and Liberation, as well as a collection of poetry, The Marrow's Telling, Words in Motion. And he has been published in many periodicals and anthologies. Please join me in welcoming Eli Clare.
Thank you, everyone. It's great to be here. A little nerve-wracking to be doing this on Zoom. I've not done a big talk yet on Zoom, and there's something about having the participant number right in front of me, kind of increasing, and I have nowhere to pace. Those of you who know me know that I'm a big pacer before a talk, and I've not been able to do that. But having said that, I want to start by reminding all of us about some access. Like, if you need to get up and move, if you need to lie down in bed, if you need to do jumping jacks, if you need to pace, if you need to lean on a wall, if you listen better while you knit or doodle or sing, if you need to sing, to, whatever you need to do, however we need to mash the space up. If you need to leave for a while and come back, do that. If you need to leave and not come back, let's mash the Zoom space up as much as possible. If access needs that aren't being met come up during my talk, I believe just keep putting them in the chat. I'm assuming that my volume, for those of you who are listening to this, is okay right now. Is there any way to flag that to me? If either way, if my volume is okay or if my volume is not okay. Okay, excellent. If that changes, interrupt me somehow and we'll work on that. The second thing before I move into my talk is simply to acknowledge what day it is, that we're 3 days out of an election. There are many uncertainties. There's a lot of actual present day danger for some of us. There's a lot of worry about danger for others of us. It's a time of unknown for all of us. It's a time of waiting for all of us. And so I just want to name that that's part of our days right now. And this talk isn't directly about any of this. And yet I think that even though this talk is about bigger and longer range forces, and for some of us it may not be make sense to think about those longer range forces today, I also think that those longer range forces, systems of oppression, histories, ways of living in different kinds of body minds, have everything to do with why we're here on a day like today. So just thank you for being here. Thank you for however you're getting through today. And I fully believe that with each other, in community, as much as we can, we will get through this. So with that, this is called Notes on Cure. disability and natural world. It comes in 7 sections. Section 1, prayers, crystals, vitamins. Strangers offer me Christian prayers or crystals and vitamins, always with the same intent: to touch me, fix me, mend my cerebral palsy, if only I will comply. They cry over me, wrap their arms around my shoulders, kiss my cheek. After 5 decades of these kinds of interactions, I still don't know how to rebuff their pity, how to tell them the simple truth that I am not broken. Even if there were a cure for brain cells that died at birth, I refuse. I have no idea who I'd be without my tremoring and tense muscles, slurring tongue. They assume me unnatural, want to make me normal, take for granted the need and desire for care. Strangers ask me, what's your defect? To them, my body-mind just doesn't work right. Defect being another variation of broken, supposedly neutral. But think of the things called defective. The MP3 player that won't turn on, the car that never ran reliably. They end up in the bottom drawer, dumpster, scrapyard. Defects are disposable and abnormal. Body minds or objects to eradicate. Strangers pat me on the head. They whisper platitudes in my ear, cliches about courage and overcoming. Courage and inspiration. They enthuse about how remarkable I am. They declare me special. Not long ago, a white woman wearing dream catcher earrings and a fringed leather tunic with a medicine wheel painted on its back grabbed me in a bear hug. She told me that I, like all people who tremor, was a natural shaman. I want to pause here and say that I am not making this story up. I'm not even exaggerating the story. The story is not a compilation of different experiences. I couldn't make this stuff up even if I wanted to. She told me that I, like all people who tremor, was a natural shaman. Yes, a shaman. In that split second, racism and ableism tumbled into each other yet again. The entitlement that leads white people to co-opt indigenous spiritualities, tangling into the ableist stereotypes that bestow disabled people with spiritual qualities. She whispered in my ear that if I were trained, I could become a great healer, directing me never to forget my specialness. Oh, how special disabled people are. We have special education, special needs, special spiritual abilities. That word drips condescension. It's no better than being defective. And a heads up about this next paragraph, which includes some racist and ableist hate language. And I'm going to be saying a couple of those words rather than use the euphemism for those words. So just a heads up that that language is coming up. Strangers, neighbors, and bullies have long called me retard. It doesn't happen so often now. Still, there's a guy down the road who, when he's drunk, taunts me as I walk by with my dog. But when I was a child, retard was a daily occurrence. Once on a camping trip with my family, I joined a whole crowd of kids playing tag in and around the picnic structure. A slow, clumsy 9-year-old, I quickly became it. I chased and chased, but caught no one. The game turned. Kids came close, ducked away, yelling, retard. Frustrated, I yelled back for a while. Retard became monkey. My playmates circled me. The words became a torrent. You're a monkey, monkey, monkey. I gulped, I choked, I sobbed. Frustration, shame, humiliation swallowed me. My body mind crumpled. It lasted 2 minutes or 2 hours. I don't know. When my father appeared, the circle scattered. Even as the word monkey connected me to the non-human natural world, I became supremely unnatural. All these kids, adults, strangers join a legacy of naming all disabled people and non-disabled Black, Indigenous, and other people of color not quite human. They approach me with prayers and vitamins, taunts and endless questions, convinced that I am special, an inspiration, a tragedy in need of cure, disposable, broken, the momentum of centuries behind them. 2, the restoration of health. And an ideology seeped into every corner of white Western thought and culture. Cure rides on the back of normal and natural. Insidious and pervasive, it impacts most of us. In response, we need neither a wholehearted acceptance nor an outright rejection of cure, but rather a broad-based grappling. The American Heritage Dictionary defines cure as, quote, the restoration of health, end quote. Those 3 words seem simple enough, but actually health is a mire. I could try to determine who's healthy and who's not, acting as if there might be a single objective standard. I could struggle to clarify the relationship between health and disability. I could work as many activists and healers do to redefine health, moving toward theories and practices that contribute to the well-being of entire communities. But in using the American Heritage Dictionary definition as a springboard, actually what I want is to move away from this mire altogether and follow the word restoration. To restore a house that's falling down or a tall grass prairie ecosystem that's been devastated is to return it to an earlier and often better condition. In this return, we try to undo the damage, wishing the damage had never happened. Talk to anyone who does restoration work, carpenters who rebuild 150-year-old neglected houses, or conservation biologists who turn agribusiness cornfields back to tallgrass prairie. They'll say it's a complex undertaking. A fluid, responsive process, restoration requires digging into the past, stretching toward the future, and working hard in the present. And the end results rarely, if ever, match the original state. Restoring a tallgrass prairie means rebuilding a dynamic system that has been destroyed by the near extinction of bison, the presence of cattle, and generations of agribusiness, farming, and fire suppression. The goal isn't to recreate a static landscape somehow frozen in time, but rather to foster dynamic interdependencies ranging from clods of dirt to towering thunderheads, tiny microbes to herds of bison. This work builds upon knowledge about and experience with an 8,000-year-old ecosystem of which only remnants remain, isolated pockets of lead plants, milkweed, bur oak, and switchgrass growing in cemeteries and on remote bluffs, somehow miraculously surviving. The intention is to mirror this historical ecosystem as closely as possible, even though some element is bound to be missing or different. The return close, but not complete. I circle back to the ideology of cure, framing it the kind of restoration reveals the most obvious and essential tenets. First, cure requires damage, locating the harm entirely within individual human body minds, operating as if each person were their own ecosystem. Second, it grounds itself in an original state of being, relying upon a belief that what existed before is superior to what exists currently. And finally, it seeks to return what is damaged to that former state of being. But for some of us, even if we accept disability as damage to individual body minds, these tenets quickly become tangled because an original non-disabled state of being doesn't exist. How would I or the medical industrial complex go about restoring my body mind, the vision of me without tremoring hands and slurred speech, with more balance and coordination, doesn't originate in my visceral history. Rather, it arises from an imagination of what I should be like, from some definition of normal and natural. 3. Walking in the prairie. My friend Jay and I walk in the summer rain through a 30-acre pocket of tallgrass prairie that was, not so long ago, one big agribusiness cornfield. We follow the path mowed as a fire break. He carries a big flowered umbrella. Water droplets hang on the grasses. Spider webs glint. The bee balm hasn't blossomed yet. He points out the numerous patches of birch, goldenrod, and thistle. The first two belong here, but need to be thinned out. The thistle, on the other hand, should be entirely uprooted. The Canada wild rye wave, the big blue stem almost open, clusters of sunflowers brighten the rainy day. We pause to admire the cornflowers and asters. The songbirds and butterflies have taken shelter. For the moment, all is quiet. Soon, my jeans are sopping wet from the knees down. This little piece of prairie is utterly different from a cornfield. A whole group of people, including Jay, worked for over a decade to restore this land. With financial and material help from Wisconsin's Department of Natural Resources, they mowed and burned the cornfield. They broadcast the seed sack upon sack of the right mix that might replicate the tall grass prairie that was once here. They rooted out thistle and prickly ash. They saved money for more seed, working to undo the 2 centuries of environmental destruction wreaked by plows, pesticides, acres upon acres of soybeans and corn. The Department of Natural Resources partners with this work precisely because the damage is so great. Without the massive web of prairie roots to anchor the earth, the land now known as Wisconsin is literally draining away. Rain catches the topsoil, washing it from field to creek to river to ocean. Prairie restoration reverses this process, both stabilizing and creating soil. Jay and his friends worked hard, remembering all the while that neither they nor the dairy farmer down the road owned this land. It was stolen a century and a half ago from the Eastern Dakota people. The histories of grass, dirt, bison massacre, genocide live here, floating in the air, tunneled into the earth. During my visits to CJ, I've taken this walk a dozen times over the last 15 years, at noon with the sun blazing, at dusk with fireflies lacing the grasses, at dawn with finches and warblers greeting the day. My feet still feel the old cornfield furrows. As we return to the farmhouse, I think about natural and unnatural, trying to grasp their meanings. Is an agribusiness cornfield unnatural, or restored prairie natural? How about the abundance of thistle, absence of bison, those old corn furrows? What was once normal here? What can we consider normal now? Or are these the wrong questions? Maybe the earth just holds layer upon layer of history. 4. Wishing you less pain. You and I know each other through a loose national network of queer disability activists made possible by the internet. Online, one evening, I received a message from you containing the cyber equivalent to a long, anguished moan of physical pain. You explain that you're having a bad pain day, and it helps to acknowledge the need to howl. Before I log off, I type you a good night. I type a good night to you. wish you a little less pain for the morning. Later, you thank me for not wishing you a pain-free day. You say, the question isn't whether I'm in pain, but rather how much. As I get to know you in person, you tell me, I read the medical journals hoping for a breakthrough in pain treatment that might make a difference. You work to locate a doctor who might believe your reports of pain. Work to create the appropriate script, the exact words and stories that will open the door, lead doctors to treat you as a patient rather than a drug-seeking criminal. Work to obtain the necessary scripts, the actual prescriptions. Work to find the right balance of narcotics. You work and work and work some more. The rhetoric of many disability activists declares there's nothing wrong with disabled body minds, even as we differ from what's considered normal. I viewed this line myself more than once, to which you respond. Resisting the assumption that we are wrong or broken makes sense, but the chronic, fatiguing health pain I live with is not a healthy variation, not a natural body-mind difference. I grasp at the meanings of natural and unnatural again, the moments and locations where disability and chronic pain occur. Can we consider them natural as our fragile, resilient human body minds interact with the world? Is it natural when the spine snaps after being flung from a car or a horse? When the brain processes information in fragmented ways after being exposed to lead, mercury, pesticides? Can the body-mind be deemed both natural and abnormal? I ask because I don't understand. And when are those moments and locations of disability and chronic pain unnatural? As unnatural as war, toxic landfills, child abuse, and poverty. 5, cautionary tale. You and I meet at a disability community event. We end up in a long conversation about shame and love. You tell me that the military dumped trichloroethylene near your childhood home, that chemical leaching into the groundwater and shaping your disabled body-mind as you floated in utero. When you talk to people about this pollution and its impact, they most often respond with pity, turning you and your wheelchair into a tragedy. As you tell me this story, I think of a series of advertisements in the Sierra Club's campaign, Beyond Coal. In one, the tagline reads, quote, asthma, birth defects, cancer, enough, end quote, superimposed over a looming smoke belching power plant. In another, we see the big belly of a pregnant woman dressed in pink, one hand cupping her stomach. Her skin is light brown, her face isn't visible. Her belly is captioned, quote, this little bundle of joy is now a reservoir of mercury, end quote. The fine print tells us, quote, mercury pollution from our nation's coal-burning power plants is harming pregnant women and their unborn children. Mercury is a powerful neurotoxin that can damage the brain and nervous system, causing developmental problems and learning disabilities, end quote. To persuade viewers that these plants need to be shut down, both ads use disability to make an argument about the consequences of environmental destruction. There's so much to pull apart here by gender and race. The second ad relies upon stereotypes about femininity and the supposed vulnerability, of women and children. It objectifies a woman of color, reducing her to a body part, which is then further reduced to a reservoir. And at the center of this argument is disability. Seemingly, the ads ask us to act in alliance with the people most impacted by the burning of coal, people of color and poor people who all too often work amidst and live near environmental damage. But digging down a bit, the Sierra Club twists away from solidarity, focusing instead on particular kinds of body-mind conditions, asthma, birth defects, cancer, learning disabilities, transforming them into symbols for environmental damage. This strategy works because it taps into ableism. It assumes that viewers will automatically understand disability and chronic illness to be a tragedy in need of prevention and eradication. And this tragedy will, in turn, persuade us to join the struggle. Certainly, ending environmental destruction will prevent some body-mind conditions, but by bluntly using ableism, the ads conflate justice with the eradication of disability. The price disabled and chronically ill people pay for this argument is high. It reduces our experiences of breathing, of living with conditions deemed birth defects, of having cancer, of learning in a multitude of ways to proofs of injustice. This reduction disregards ableism as the primary location of the quote unquote problem of disability. It ignores the brilliant imperfection of our lives. It declares us as unnatural as coal-burning power plants. The price of this argument would be one thing if it occurred in isolation, but the Sierra Club's rhetoric is only a single example in a long line of public health campaigns against drunk driving, drug use, lead paint, asbestos, unsafe sex, and on and on. To use disability and chronic illness as the cautionary tale. Amidst this cacophony, you want to know how to express your hatred of military pollution without feeding the assumption that your body-mind is tragic, wrong, and unnatural. No easy answers exist. You and I talk intensely. Both the emotions and the ideas are dense. We arrive at a slogan for you. I hate the military and love my body. Undoubtedly, we could have come up with a catchier or more complex slogan. For sure, we could have done that. But at the same time, it lays bare on the central question. How do we witness, name, and resist the injustices that reshape and damage all kinds of body minds, plant and animal, organic and inorganic, non-human and human, while not equating disability with injustice? 6. Body-mind yearning. The desire for cure, for the restoration of health, is connected to loss and yearning. What we remember about our body minds in the past seduces us. We wish, we mourn, we yearn. We make deals, we desire to return to the days before immobilizing exhaustion or impending death, to the nights 30 years ago when we spun across the dance floor. We dream about the body minds we once had before depression descended, before we gained 20, 50, 100 pounds. We ache for the evenings curled up in bed with a book before the ability to read vanished in an instant as a landmine or bomb exploded. We reach toward the past and dream about the future, feeling grief, envy, shame. We compare our body minds to friends and lovers, models in the magazines, Glamour and Men's Health. Photoshopped versions of humans hold sway. We find ourselves lacking. The gym, diet plan, miracle cure grip us. Normal and natural won't leave us alone. We remain tethered to our body minds of the past, wanting to transport them into our future, imagining, in essence, a kind of time travel. Even without a non-disabled past tugging at me, I too find myself yearning. Occasionally, I wish I could step into the powerful grace of a gymnast or rock climber, but that wish is distant, fading away almost as soon as I recognize it. Sometimes the face of a task I can't do, frustration overwhelms me, and I wish for steady, nimble hands. But in those moments, I have learned to turn away from bitterness and simply ask for help. At the same time, my most persistent longing centers on body-mind change. As my wrists, elbows, and shoulders have grown stiff and sore, I've had to stop kayaking. It's a small loss, the scheme of things, but I do miss gliding on the rippling surface of a lake, the rhythm of my paddle dipping in and out of the water. Here is such a compelling response to body-mind loss, precisely because it promises us our imagined time travel. But this promise can also devalue our present day body minds. It can lead us to dismiss the lessons we've learned, knowledge gained, scars acquired. It can bind us to the past and glorify the future. It can fuel hope grounded in nothing but the shadows of natural and normal. And when this time travel doesn't work, or simply isn't possible. We need 1,000 ways to process the grief prompted by body-mind loss. 7, yearning for the peeper pond. The connections between loss, yearning, and restoration aren't only about human body minds. Many of us mourn the vacant lots, woods, and swamps we played in as children, now transformed into landfills, strip malls, and parking lots. We fear the wide-reaching impact of climate change as hurricanes grow more frequent, glaciers melt, and deserts expand. We long for the days when bison roamed the Great Plains and Chinook salmon swam upstream in the millions. We desire a return. And so environmentalists, partly motivated by this longing, have started to learn the art and science of ecological restoration. They broadcast tall grass, prairie seeds, raise and release wolves, bison, whooping cranes. They tear up drainage tiles and reroute water back into what used to be wetlands. They pick up trash, blow up dams, plant trees, hoping beyond hope that they can restore ecosystems to some semblance of their former selves before the white colonialist, capitalist, industrial damage was done. When it works, restoration can be a powerful force, contributing to their well-being, as well as providing an antidote to loss. But the damage may be irreversible, some ecosystems irreplaceable. Restoration may take centuries, maybe a band-aid stuck onto a gaping wound. We may not be able to fix what has been broken. Below my house, on the edge of cow pastures, there used to be a little swampy pond surrounded by cattails where the early spring, just after the ice melted, hundreds of peepers would breed. These small, light brown frogs would sing through the night. Sometimes I'd walk to the pond and stand for 10 or 15 minutes, surrounded by their chorus, eardrums, and chest, reverberating, shoes growing soggy. 2 summers ago, neighbors built a house down there. I watched the structure go up, but didn't register what it might mean for the peepers. Last spring, I headed down to the peeper pond as usual, tromping through the upper field, then the hedgerow, coming out at the western edge of the cow pastures. But there was no pond, no chorus of peepers falling silent as I approached. I wandered around for a while, feeling disoriented before I realized that my neighbor's backyard was exactly where the peeper pond used to be. It's a tiny loss in the scheme of things. This patch of land occupied Abenaki territory has endured so much ecological change in the almost 4 centuries since white people stole it. We clear cut it 3 times, fenced it with stone walls, hedgerows, barbed wires, planted grass, put sheep and cows out to graze, built houses and barns in wetlands, created manure piles, drilled wells for water, leaked gas, made garbage heaps of wire, glass, mattresses, tires, railroad ties, bulldozed roads. More than enough damage has been done, and yet many native plants and animals are somehow doing well, including the beavers. Still, I miss this particular beaver pond, yearn to stand again at its edge, listening. There's no return to the time before my neighbor's house, before the cows and sheep, before white people arrived. Instead, I carry these losses with me. I'm slowly learning the importance of bearing witness, a quiet daily recognition, so different from the desire to repair. And let these losses sit uncomfortably in my heart. And at the same time, I walk in the woods, recycle. I take to the streets to shut down the natural gas pipeline that the Vermont Gas Company wants to build not far from here. I grow kale and beets in their backyard. I joined the solar electric co-op down the road. I remember that the Abenaki Nation has not vanished. 4 bands making home on the land currently known as Vermont. They've relearned old traditions and they're creating new ones. They've gained recognition from the state government. They've acquired in recent years several pieces of land, one of them an old burial site, and another a sacred spot they've frequented for thousands of years. They join indigenous peoples from all over the world in finding many ways to survive, to cultivate well-being, to defend their sovereignty. And still, there's no return to the past. I remember my conversation with the woman whose body mind has been shaped by military pollution. Remember her slogan, I hate the military and love my body. I said with the question, how do we witness, name, and resist the injustices that reshape and damage all kinds of body mind, plant and animal, organic and inorganic, non-human and human, while not equating disability with injustice? I feel my grief and rage over environmental losses as small as the disappearance of a single paper pond and as big as the widespread poisoning of the planet's groundwater. I think about how we might bear witness to body-mind loss while also loving ourselves just as we are right now. I begin to understand restoration, both of ecosystems and of health, as one particular relationship between the past, present, and future. Thank you. And I would love to stay here with all of you who can stay for some community conversation. You know, we talk about this period of time after a talk as Q&A, but that assumes that you all have questions and I have answers. And I know it doesn't work that way. That's one of the few things I know for absolute sure that it doesn't work that way. So I prefer to think of this as conversation, as a time for community to be in dialogue with each other, for a time for rants and raves, a time for soapboxes, a time for agreements and disagreements, a time for questions from all of us and answers from all of us. So whatever is on our hearts and minds and in our bellies and throats right now.
So some options for how to share what is in your belly and throat right now. You can raise your hand, and I believe we can make you a panelist and put you up if you would like to sort of talk and voice your question. If you would like to write your question, you can put it in the inaptly named Q&A or in the chat. We've got both of those open, and I already see somebody who has asked, can you further on the idea of bearing witness, especially in current times?
Yeah. So what is bearing witness and how do we do it? You know, bearing witness is a lot of different kinds of both actions and ways of being. And bearing witness is often about saying, here I am, here we are. So I want to acknowledge that bearing witness is sometimes individual, but is often collective. Isn't the work of single people by themselves. It's often the work of many people collectively. And it's often the work of saying, I am present, we are present, we are seeing, we are hearing, we are feeling, we are sensing. The grief, the rage, the injustice, the action that should never have happened, the devastation that is wrong, the destruction that does not have to be this way. We are present. We acknowledge it. We are not denying it. We are here to name it in words, in our presence, in our refusal to ignore it. So in some ways, witness has a lot to do with refusing denial. Witness is a particular kind of activism that isn't necessarily about knowing how to make change in this specific moment. Witnessing is often one strategy in the long haul work of creating sustained change and liberation. But by itself, as a strategy, witnessing can happen when we don't yet know how to make change. We can say by our presence and by our naming and by our words that this we are not going to turn away from. This we are not going to deny. This we are going to be present with. So witnessing can be a tremendously important kind of action and way of being. And a time exactly like this, when there's so many unknowns, and there's so much fear, and there's so much actual present risk, some of which is manifesting as we speak, and some of which we fear based on history and based on what could possibly very easily happen. Many of us don't know what's next. Many of us know what the long-term strategies are for change, but what are the short-term strategies for change? Many of us don't know right now. And witnessing as a strategy can be really useful right now because we don't need to know what's next to witness right now. To say, no, this is wrong. This has to stop. We feel the wrongness all the way through us. We are not going to turn away from this. We are going to keep naming it. And there's so much power there, particularly when we see witnessing not as an act, not as the end strategy. We're just going to witness this wrongness and stop there, but witness as one strategy and one place to be in the moment that supports other kinds of strategies. So that's a little about witness, and I'm sure that people who have spent their lives as really rigorous and disciplined witnesses, people who've gone to many sites, people of injustice, people who have lived in sites of injustice, who have made, whose homes on the sites of injustices and given their lives over to witnessing. There's so much more to say.
So in the chat, we've had many people say thank you. I want to read one of those thank yous. So I had the privilege to share a chapter from this book with my class, Nira writes, a class of medical students this year. It was impactful and challenging. I am continuously moved by this book, how beautifully it sits with the tensions of care, cure, restoration. I just want to say thank you for this work. And another person who's agreeing about the importance of the work and reading it in class. And Mike and I mentioned the talks yesterday that in every one of our graduate classes, we have incorporated some of Eli's work and made sure that it was there. And also with my undergrads, I just time and time again find myself coming back to the ways in which Eli is able to hold tension, to sit with the complication, and to let us stay there. And so we have another question on witnessing that's happening in the Q&A. And so the question is witnessing also tied in some ways to relationship, respecting reciprocal connections between ourselves, our communities, and our larger connections to our physical environments?
Yeah. Yeah. So I'll have something to say about that question, which is really both a question and the beautiful expansion of the meaning of witness. But before I return to thinking about witness, I want to thank and return the person who's teaching brilliant imperfection to medical students. It was one of my desires as the book was, as I was finishing the book, and the book took a full 12 years to write. One of my desires as the book was, as I was beginning to see that the book was going to move into the world, that it would become a set of ideas that healthcare providers, all kinds of healthcare providers, would engage with, and not necessarily to agree with, but that I so want the conversation about cure to be provoked among healthcare providers. And my experience with the book is it's been a really hard book to get in front of service providers in training. And so just thank you for doing that work. So to come back to witness now, and your question really lays out without something that I deeply believe about witness, that witness as a powerful strategy in the work, the long haul work towards social, economic, and racial justice doesn't happen as active charity. It doesn't happen by people coming in because they have the intention of doing good for other people that they consider not themselves. We're so drenched in the world full of charity that, the charity model shapes so much of how the social safety net works in this country. For instance, how nonprofits are fundamentally structured, and charity, it's not that charity does no good, and certainly food and housing and healthcare and durable medical equipment that people get through charity is necessary for survival. Like, I'm not saying let's take charity away right now, because if we took charity away right now, there would be people who died because of that. But fundamentally, charity isn't going to dismantle the systems of power and privilege that need to dismantle. It's not going to dismantle white supremacy. It's not going to dismantle capitalism. It's not going to dismantle patriarchy. It's not going to dismantle the gender binary. On and on and on. Charity is embedded in all the systems. And so witness at its most powerful and an activist way doesn't come from a charity. That model doesn't come from a belief that we from the outside of the community are coming in to do good for another group of people. It happens from within communities, and it happens through relationships of accomplices and conspirators who are deeply related to each other, where I'm not saying that you have to be marginalized by an injustice to witness it, but those of us who are privileged are witnessing the systems of privilege that we benefit from. We need to know deeply that our witnessing is about ourselves. We're witnessing ourselves, as well as harm and violence is done to other beings, both human and other than human. So yes, I would totally agree that witnessing in its most powerful social justice strategy form is a practice of relationship.
Thank you so much for the, sorry.
You got it, Mike. Go ahead.
I just wanted to say thank you so much for the response. And we do have another question in the Q&A. Someone asks, what role do you think visual depictions of landscape, from landscape painting to photography, documenting environmental degradation, can play in helping us contemplate the relation between body, mind, land, and time?
Wow. That's a big question. One of the things that makes me think of, and this is a conversation I always want to have with people. This is a time when Zoom is completely frustrating, even though I appreciate the access of it. I appreciate our being able to be here today amidst a pandemic that prohibits large community in-person gatherings and creates access for people for whom large person community gatherings were never possible. But this question makes me think about the role of art in making justice. So the question was more specifically, as I heard it, was about landscape art, about photos and painting, visual art, about landscapes, but it makes me think about the bigger function of art in relationship to justice. And one of those relationships, I want to talk about two relationships. There are many, many relationships, and that's part of how this needs to be a community conversation. One of the relationships is art often functions as memory of things in the recent past, and then historical memory of things in the distant past. And when thinking about art in relationship to the natural world, I think about the power of photos from 100 years ago, photos of what the salmon runs in the lower 48 in California, what is now California, Oregon, and Washington look like. Those photos of rivers just brimming full of salmon as they were returning to the spawning ground. And those photos, that photo documentation, some of which was seen as art and some of which was just seen as taking pictures, is a historical memory. A second, and that memory then can inform what we know about loss today. To have those photos of the spawning grounds on the Columbia River that were destroyed through damming, the traditional hunting and fishing grounds of a number of indigenous nations. Those photos are a kind of historical witness, both of loss and what we need to struggle against. They're part of motivating dam destruction, for instance. This is some of it was flooded by this dam, and if we take this dam out, this is what we will get back. All of us, both human and other than human, indigenous and settler. And all of it I just named, there are so many different relationships to the losses. So that's one relationship, this kind of holding witness and creating historical archive, both collective and personal. Another relationship between art and justice work is helping us dream, helping us creating the conditions where it's possible to dream about the world we want, the world we're working towards creating. And without dreaming and imagination, it's hard to know how we're going to get to that world. And art helps create the conditions of that dreaming. Audre Lorde and her famous essay, so Audre Lorde, Black lesbian feminist writer, mother, poet, warrior, as she often described herself. In her famous essay, Poetry is Not a Luxury, talked about poetry as a way of predicating our hopes and dreams, moving them towards language, and from language to naming to action, so that she doesn't claim a direct line between poetry and change, but she was talking deeply about how poetry, and I would argue art more generally, creates the conditions that make dreaming more possible. And so art had this function of sustaining us. And art about the natural world is certainly sustenance in this time where so much of the natural world is at risk through many forces, and climate chaos being one of them. And we as humans living through this pandemic, where the violence of this pandemic is revealing differentials along race and class and disability lines every day, where some of us are living in deep isolation to survive the virus. We're in so much need of sustenance, and art is part of that sustenance. So I'll step off that soapbox. Thank you for the question, and the question obviously prompted this. A soapbox appeared and I stepped on it, and now I'm going to step off.
Your soapbox has one of our audience members in tears. And now that we're off the soapbox just for a moment, I wanted to ask a very easy question. So someone asked, would it be all right if I shared the transcript of this talk on Slack with my critical disability studies classmates at Portland State University /UT Austin? And they also asked, will this talk be shared in video form anywhere? I can answer that second part. So the talk will be on beehives.org with captions and a transcript eventually, and I'll let Eli answer the other part of that question.
Right. Feel free to use the access copies of this talk for your personal use. And I would say you can also use the access copies in limited educational ways. But what I don't want is for the PDF, the access PDFs, to be reposted on social media. Also, this talk is drawn entirely from Brilliant Imperfections. So if you want more of this, there's much more of it in the book. But do feel free to the access copies in the limited ways I just described.
Thanks for that answer. And then I see a question. Is there a way we might witness the internalized echoes of the voices who have kept on calling us less than, on how we might find a way to also help each other in witnessing?
Would you repeat that question it has a couple of layers and I missed the layers.
Sure. So is there a way we might witness the internalized echoes of the voices who have kept on calling us less than? On how we might find a way to also help each other in witnessing?
Right, right. So that work inside communities of witnessing the damage of what I think of when I hear less than, I think of the forces that devalue us, the forces that want us dead, the forces that say we're disposable, say that we're not valuable. And the work of witnessing what that does within marginalized communities. And I want to say that the forces I just named function differently in different marginalized communities. But and the work of witnessing that damage, of just acknowledging the damage, acknowledging the harm, is such collective and community work. And it's done in a lot of ways. You know, I've been in rooms where we just end up telling stories, and what we provide each other is a place to like know, to be like, I'm here with that story. I hear that story, I feel that story, I see that story. Sometimes the witnessing is a Me Too moment. That's happened to me also. So that's one of the ways of witnessing. Another way of witnessing is through activism. It's like we're taking these stories to the streets. We're taking these stories to Twitter. We're making these stories and this damage into hashtags. And all that is possible through this collective witnessing efforts. Another kind of that witnessing is also about moving towards what we know is true inside community. And right now I'm thinking of a really powerful social media campaign that happened a year and a half, 2 years ago. It was kind of spearheaded in the Bay Area. Fat people and disabled people using framework of fat liberation and disability justice, organizing a protest around deportation and the caging of people, particularly children, but people in general, the caging of brown and black immigrants at the border. So this would have been 2 summers ago, and they were planning this protest on social media. One of the organizers posted with the question, if we're not disposable, what are we? If we're not disposable, what are we? And that thread generated hundreds and hundreds of responses. Essential, cherished, necessary, right, on and on, hundreds and hundreds of words in resistance. to the notion of being disposable, but at some point it became more than resistance because we were speaking through these words, speaking of what we knew to be true and what we dreamed of wanting to be true in the future. And organizers took those words and made signs of those words, and people carried them in the street demonstration, the protests. So there were people carrying the word cherished, carrying the word essential, carrying the word brilliant, carrying the such a powerful kind of witnessing, because it wasn't only witnessing the harm, certainly witnessing the harm, but also witnessing the truth beyond and through and inside and under and over the harm. Dreaming what's true, saying what's true now. So another really powerful kind of witnessing.
Lovely. Do you think one more question sounds possible?
One or
Or one
two.
comment? One or two
Yeah.
more? Yeah, one or two more questions or comments if anybody has them out there before we wrap up. We know the format of Zoom can be exhausting, and so we're not going to hold the space for the whole 2 hours, but let's make sure we go out with whatever you're thinking out there. So while folks have a little time to think, I can ask one real quick. I just wanted to ask about time. So obviously we've got the moment where you're being bullied and there's like 2 hours or 2 minutes, like it's just sort of impossible to tell the difference in your talk. And then we've got the sort of time travel of longing, or the desired time travel of longing. And then we've got the time it takes to do the work of restoration versus the time of environmental damage. And I'm just thinking about pace in our activism and how to make it sustainable. And if you could speak to, because of the sort of scales, some of them the immediate of this week, the intensity and pain of this moment, and then the sort of longer things that we need to prepare ourselves for. I was hoping you could just speak a little bit about how we respond to the various time scales of that our activism has to happen on, and the various paces of our body minds as we approach that.
Yeah. So the work of social justice, the work of social, racial, and economic justice is long haul work. It's not measured in days, and it's not measured in weeks, and it's not measured in semesters, and it's not measured in years. It's measured in decades. And I've learned from Black activists that it's actually work that's measured in centuries. And so part of activist work is patience, just patience and trust that the work we're doing now is going to impact the work that happens tomorrow and the next day and the next day and the next day, which will impact, and that impact will accumulate over time. And there's a kind of patience to that, of working, of doing this hard work without expecting immediate results. But at the same time, with this patience, we need a fierce impatience. This is not okay right now and has to change yesterday because we are dying. A radical impatience at every moment, but a balance between that patience and that impatience. And with that, with the patience, knowing that in one moment that we need to move away, that we can't be at the center of the intensity of any single moment. Part of the patience is to be like, we can move away as long as we also know when we need to move forward. And coupled with the impatience is the recognition that there are lots and lots and lots of ways to do this work, that this work does not look any one way, that being in the streets in relationship to grass is only one way of doing this. We can do this from our beds. We can do this in our houses. We can do this making art. We can do this by making policy. We can do this by feeding other people. We can do this by being the respite for people who are on the streets, that there are a million ways to do this and at whatever paces our body, minds move, that it's a lie that we all have to be able to do it in one way. So when I think about activism and time and what different body minds can do, I think of something Cyrus Marcus Ware often says, that there is going to be no revolution, that disabled and mad and chronically ill and neurodivergent and deaf people aren't a central part of. And we're going to be a central part of that revolution in a million different ways. So that question of time is about holding patience and impatience together at the very same time in this long haul work that spikes over and over again in various different ways.
And it looks like we do have another question in the Q&A. As allies doing the work of witnessing, how do we guard against appropriation?
So people with privilege and power doing work, witnessing being one of those kinds of work, but not the only kind of work. We need to be taking leadership, taking direction from the people most impacted. So for instance, right now I'm going to talk about white supremacy because we're in this time of tremendous uprising against white supremacy and tremendous activation of white supremacists. So this work of toppling white supremacy, of ending white supremacy, white people need to be doing the work, but at every turn. And so I'm talking to white people here. At every turn, we as white people need to be taking leadership from Black, Indigenous, and other people of color. we're the people to do the background work. We're the people to be like, no, not my mic, pass the mic. We're like, we go where we're told we're needed, but that does not mean that we get passive. So it's holding, like, take the leadership, but don't get passive. Don't become passive. Another piece about avoiding appropriation is when you're working as someone with power and privilege in a community that's marginalized by the system that's giving power and privilege. Part of the difference between doing accomplice work and charity work is making relationship, making deep and lasting relationship, making commitment, making sure that if you're going to be connected to spirituality or to music or to the culture of that community, that you get connected to the people, you know where that music came from, you know what pieces of that spiritual system you can actually have access to, and what parts of that spiritual system are not yours to even know about. I think of a t-shirt that a Black poet here in Burlington often wears to demos, and he's someone who's been to repeated demos against police violence here in Burlington, and Vermont's a very white state, and so he's this really powerful Black poet who has repeatedly read the same poem about what police brutality means for Black men particularly. And it's this incredible spoken word poem. And I've seen him come off the mic breathless, that he had nothing left to give. And he has done that repeatedly. And he often wears a t-shirt that says, love Black people as much as you love Black culture. Says so much, right? If those of us who are white are going to enjoy Black culture, so much of what US culture is stolen from Black culture. If we're going to love Black culture, we need to love Black people. And appropriation and resisting appropriation doesn't have to be about love, but it does have to be about deep relationship, that we can't pick and choose what we're going to be connected to. And the final thing I'd say about appropriation is some of us feel like there are rules about appropriation, what's okay and what's not, and we apply those rules over and over again. I've come to think of the work of resisting appropriation as a set of questions. It's not a set of rules, it's a set of questions. What do I know about the history? What do I know about the current conditions? What am I doing to act to end those conditions? How am I being an accomplice to people? And we have to ask those questions every single time. It's much harder work than having a set of rules about appropriation, about cultural appropriation, but have a set of questions that we ask every time. In the book Thinking Class by Joe Coddy, there's this incredible essay about cultural appropriation as Coddy thinks through issues around drumming, particularly. And that Thinking Class is out of print, but there are copies around, and it's a really good piece to start the conversation about cultural appropriation.
All right, thank you so much. And we're getting some more thank yous in the chat, including from one person who's attending from New Zealand, thanking for the opportunity to engage with this community that wouldn't normally be available on their side of the world. That also ties in with the last question that we have in the Q&A, which is from an international student asking, I'm really grateful to join this amazing talk and want to ask that would you have any words for the international readers or students with a global perspective of social justice or activism?
I'm pausing because we could rewind this afternoon and spend the whole 2 hours thinking about all of this from a global perspective. To think about cure, to think about care, to think about healthcare provision, to think about the role of multinational capitalism, to think about the rise of right-wing populism around the world. All of the issues we talked about here today can also be talked about in a global way about, how do people from the global north and white people around the world, how does witness work? How do white people, European and American, follow the lead of Black, Indigenous, and other people of color all over the world? So makes me think about something I've heard all of my activist life, that the revolution is not going to start here in the US. The revolution is going to start elsewhere. I think one of the global struggles we have is to bring multinational capitalism down. Just bring it down. Just multinational capitalism has meant that some people mostly in the global north and mostly white are rich and other people are poor. That multinational capitalism depends on poverty, depends on hunger, depends on starvation, depends that it wouldn't exist without those things. It depends on sweatshop labor all over the world, and so multinational capitalism has to end. And that work is going to be global work. That work isn't the work of people in a single nation state. There's so much else to say, and there's so much about this that I don't know, because I have made my activist work and art making, writing, poetry really grounded in the US. So there's so much about the global work that I know nothing about. So I want to say, I want to really acknowledge that there's a lot I don't know here. Yeah. And thank you for reminding us that all of this is global. All of this is the entire planet. Of course, all of this is the entire planet.
Thank you so much for the generous answer. Looking at time, we have almost gotten to the full 2 hours. So I think this is a great point for us to call it a afternoon or evening or morning, wherever we may be. And thank you, Eli Clare, for this fantastic talk. And thank you everyone for making the time and taking the time to be here to listen and ask such thoughtful questions.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, everyone. And I want to leave hoping that everyone is taking as much care of themselves and each other as possible right now. Thank you so much.
Thanks also to our interpreters and captioners and for everybody for being here from wherever you were. Just one more time. I am the sort of, once I hit this X button, this Zoom will go away. So I just wanted to say thanks and goodbye.